You're not trying to get this person to write like you.
Well, let's look at line length. Let's look at intent. That's a different conversation.
What you want is for me to tell you you're a good person. You're a good person. Now, who do you read?
You ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
How you guys feeling?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. When you guys were making your sets, what were some things you were thinking about? Maybe I'll start with Steve.
I tend to write a lot of either serious or sometimes oblique poems. So I said, well, try to find poems that are going to deal with the kinds of topics that I deal with, but salt in some things that are going to lighten things up a bit.
Yeah, I think that, I think there's like a big difference between ordering poems for a book versus ordering poems for a reading. Because I think sometimes with the reading, I tend to leave a little bit of space or room to see how the crowd's doing. So like if I have someone that comes before me that has a lot of serious poems and the mood is very deep, I will think, well, do I want to deepen that mood or do I want to bring it up? So it really depends on the conversation that my poems are having with someone else in the set. Or if I'm trying to create a story within the poems that I'm choosing, then there's that option as well. Yeah.
So when you were hearing Steve's poems tonight, what were you thinking?
I was thinking that we have a lot of overlap with the idea of inspiration. So like news or current events or society being an inspiration point. So I was hoping you would bring poems like that. So I was like, well, I'll just have some poems that are about inspiration too, so that we would kind of be able to talk with one another, like our poems would talk. So.
Did you notice that, Steve, when she was reading?
Not so much, mostly because part of me was anticipating some poems I know she's been really working on for a while, putting a manuscript together, and most of these were new to me. So I like that part of it especially.
Yeah.
There's kind of a central topic I want to touch on with both of you. Because both of you have roles of mentorship and teaching. So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on a couple of different topics related to that. So when you have that role of being a mentor, how do you approach your students' work, your mentees' work?
I approach it with, in the back, actually probably more to the front of my mind, which is you're not trying to get this person to write like you. So be open to what the work itself is doing and what the poet seems to be trying to do. A lot of mine is about how it's going to be delivered. So I pay attention to line length and where pauses are, and oftentimes words next to one another, where if you get S's in particular at the end of a word, the beginning of the word, it often tends to get lost in a verbal reading. In a book, you get to do it inside your head, and it's not so much there.
Yeah. Well, I think in general, I've learned a lot about mentoring from you, Steve. Just the ways that you honor people as their presentation as artists, that if that's something that they really intend to do, you've always supported them and supported me in the ways that I wanted to develop. So I remember when I wanted to take residencies, you wrote those letters of recommendation. When I wanted to go back to school, you helped me with that. So I think that mentorship is shaped by the ways that the person wants to develop. It's not about the ways that I want them to develop. It's about the ways they want to develop. So if someone comes to me with a poem and just says, I just want a vibe check, then I know that they just need the encouragement. They need the encouragement to keep on going. What you're doing is what you're just exercising your power as an artist. Keep on going. But if someone comes to me with a couple poems, is I really want to get these published, then we'll get down to the nitty gritty and be like, well, let's look at line length, let's look at intent, let's look deeper into craft, because that's a different conversation than someone who just comes with a poem for a vibe check or just asks about like education or other things. So it really depends on what the person actually is looking for in mentorship.
And I think part of mentorship is taking advantage of whatever value your name or your status at one time or another has had. So, I'm an emeritus professor of English. So if someone wants to say, sure, throw that down, and I'm still working part-time for the college, I say, okay, put it on letterhead.
Yeah.
It's those kinds of things. And that doesn't mean that it's more valuable than someone else's, but it's that little bump that says, this isn't just anyone writing a recommendation or a referral.
Yeah. It's about, like, instead of being the one who, like, keeps people away from, like, institutions or access or whatever that may look like, it's like the person that lets people in, So if I know something about someone's writing and I know that there's a couple other poets that would be really inspiring to them, or craft books, I'm not going to stay in the background and just keep that information to myself, I'll offer some of it, and if that's what they're interested in, I'll go ahead and offer what I have, Because I think there's a lot of, well, not all the time, but sometimes there's a lot of secret keeping in terms of, like, this is how I developed my craft, this is how I got opportunities. Some of that is kind of hidden or concealed from people. And I think one of my goals as a mentor is to be, like, lay all the cards out and be like, these are my points of resource, these are my points of access and knowledge. Like Steve was saying, these are the ways I can let people in. It doesn't have to be an institutional sense, but like a wisdom or knowledge base. This is how I can let people in.
So if someone is coming to you and they're like, I want feedback on my piece. Hit it to me hard, How do you determine how serious they are about the feedback they're requesting?
When I was still teaching at Columbus State, it was routine several times a term for a student to show up at my door holding a little sheaf of papers and saying, Professor Abbott, Professor so-and-so said you'd take a look at my poems and tell me what you think. And I'd say, you don't want me to tell you what I think about your poems. What you want is for me to tell you you're a good person. You're a good person. Now, who do you read? And sometimes they'd hem and haw and say, well, I don't want to sound like anyone else, so I don't read a lot of poetry. And I'd say, what music do you listen to? I mean, do you think that, Dizzy Gillespie or Eddie Van Halen just dropped out of the sky playing that stuff? They listened to people and they imitated them, and then they took what they wanted. And I would pull out a half sheet of paper that had the names of like 45 poets on it, and I'd look at the person and circle about a half dozen of them and say, here, read some of these people's poems, then come back and we'll sit down and talk about them and talk about your poems. I never saw one of them again.
Oh yeah, I think it's interesting. It's kind of like if someone does come to me with a couple poems and they're asking for feedback, it really depends on, like, I ask them to get a little bit more specific, because if they're just looking for general feedback, then I'm like, well, and it depends on like where they are in terms of like their writing journey too, because I think I tend to see with like people that are just beginning, the best kind of feedback is to keep on going. Like I see these certain things that you are attempting in these poems. I think that these are important things to be talking about. Keep on going, So however, someone's like, I'm putting together a manuscript and I need more specific feedback, then I know, okay, this is something that I can, it also depends on what kind of resources or time restraints I have as well. So that's a big part of, like, what resources do I have, like, internally to do this kind of work. So that's also another factor too,
And sometimes I approach it the way I do when I'm tutoring. I work in the writing center at Columbus State, helping students with papers and all kinds of classes, and I just say, what is it you're concerned about?
Yeah.
What is it you think, is it it's not just that you doubt the whole thing. What in the past have people told you need to do more of or do better? And starting from there, I think, helps if someone brings you poems. I tend not to do it with people I have no relationship with, no connection to.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, the best feedback isn't, like, craft related, especially if someone is just coming with, like, you know, asking for a kind of like a vibe check, I guess. The best feedback that I found for people that are just looking for general feedback is to reflect back to them what I'm experiencing in their poems. So it's not really nitty gritty line break, stanza break, craft issues, or like questions. It's more just like, this is what I'm seeing in your work. Is this what you want me to experience? So that's a little bit more broad.
I like that.
It seems like there's a lot of, it almost feels a lot like business law. There's a lot of throwing the burden back onto the person to make them kind of reaffirm to themselves what they want. You know, I see that even just with students. Like when a student wants to sign up for classes with me, I'm trying to get them out. I'm trying to like throw everything out to them, like, you've never taken classes here before and you're doing fine, or like stuff like that. Like, we have these arguments with them, and then they kind of be like, well, no, like, I really need it. I found this. I have this. So it's like almost like making them reinvest and double down on what it is that they're seeking.
Yeah, I think another aspect of that is to like allow people to understand the value of their work and the value of their experience. Because I think sometimes, well, I did this too as like a younger poet. You know, I would put my work out there, but halfway, you know, almost half-heartedly, you know, because it was hard for me to take myself seriously as a writer or a poet. So I would just put something out that was only half of what I wanted to say. But being able to tell people, you know, this is what I'm seeing. Is this what you want me to see? Gives them that reflection that, oh, I'm not saying everything I wanted to say in this poem or in these couple of poems. And then just giving them like that reflection, offering like, no, what you're saying is important. Keep on going. Keep on working towards this. Because if what I'm experiencing from your poem isn't exactly what you want me to experience, then that's where the issue is. And, you know, take yourself seriously.
I think a lot of it is, what is it you want your poetry to do? I mean, I used to do it in a kind of broad, general kind, entertainment or art. You know, do you simply want to express yourself on the page, okay, or do you want to think in terms of craft based on whatever poetry has influenced you? And, you know, so that might be closed forms. You know, it might be that they want to, you know, oh, no punctuation, no capital letters, you know, and one-word lines. And, you know, it's just, so I say, okay, what is it you want to do with this? And don't tell me you want to get published. That's where I often start, which is somehow so many younger poets or developing poets see that as their validation, that will somehow mean something, it will impress their friends, it will do something. And I just say, look, if you want to get published, you can get published almost, you know, you can get published. If you don't care what kinds of poems show up next to yours or before or after yours, you can get published. Now, if that matters to you, then that's a different thing.
And that's so fascinating, Steve, because like when people have come to me about their work, it hasn't been so much about like the publication or like the validation part. It's kind of like I'm given the opportunity to help them affirm that their story is meaningful, affirm that what they're trying to tell is something that needs to be out in the world. Because a lot of the poets that I meet are people of color just like myself, and it's just like for many years I was just told my story was not important, that we have already a book of Leon Lee, we don't need anyone else, you know. So it was just like in those moments, people do come with their hearts and they're like, I'm showing you something, what do you think? But the question is more, is this important enough to tell? And I think that's the question I get a lot of the time. Not, even if it's not spoken, it's just like, is this important enough? And it's like, yes, it is important enough, and keep on going with whatever you're doing. It's important. It needs to be said.
And that's why that initial question of what is it you want, what is it you're concerned about? What is it you think you might not be doing or that you are trying to achieve? Tell me what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a good clarifying question. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like whether it's for publication or asking other people for feedback, it's kind of going to the same route where it's that need for external validation that you're having trouble finding in yourself and your own art.
Well, and, I think we've all had that, which is at some point, someone we admire, trust, love, whatever, you say, okay, here, this is coming out of me. Well, and that's why whatever critique you're going to offer has to take those kinds of things into account.
Yeah. And I think, Steve, as you've mentored me, I felt like our mentorship relationship has been also friendship, where it's just like a good friend. A mentor is someone who offers a mirror, but also offers a compass at the same time. So it's like, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm seeing in you, your work, your potential. But also here's some ways to get there if you want to get there. Or where do you want to go? This compass can help point you to the direction that you want to go as an artist. So that's been something I really appreciated with you, Steve, is that you give that openness of form in the relationship to allow the mentee to kind of develop and have that broad, those broad options. So
I think that leads to my last question nicely. So both of you have also had opportunities to study, be under people and things like that. What are, if you had to name one important lesson you've learned just from being under someone else's tutelage with regards to poetry that you think would also be beneficial for other people to hear, what would that lesson be?
Well, it's probably hard to narrow it down to one, but
for the moment right now,
I'll do it. And I think, and it's one I have come to use over and over and over again, especially because so many developing poets are working out of personal experience. And I tell them, you can use that, but it's not simply about telling the story. So don't let facts get in the way of the truth. Because the truth is something other than what happened.
Yeah.
So, mess things up. It doesn't have to be factual. It's not a history book. You're trying to create something out of something that had some impact on you. So don't stick to the facts.
Well, I think that the most important thing that I've learned from other mentors or people that have taught me, and that's including you, Steve, is just to take yourself seriously as an artist. There's power in what you are creating. However, you need to approach that power with humility and curiosity, because you do hold power as an artist, but you don't hold all the answers. And that's really important to remember, because as you're going down your journey as an artist, things are going to come in conflict with what you know. And be curious about that. Don't be devastated by that. There's going to be people that challenge you. There's going to be situations that challenge you. You may get some rough feedback, but that's all part of the process of moving into your power. So as you move into your power, do that with humility, do that with curiosity. Just keep on going.